The Christmas game evolution. Hello everyone, as you may know, I'm actually going to attempt to create this video in French, but you'll probably hear it in English with my accent translated by Hagen if the system works as intended. In this particular case, since Ian suggested I do it this way simply, and in the end I chose this solution rather than a subtitled version. Feel free to mention in the chat if you have any issues or leave a comment on the video or on the replays. I'm going to talk to you about video games once again, about a little game I created for the occasion. A little game that ended up being a bit bigger than expected, just like this presentation. So why did I make another presentation about video games? For the same reasons as always. Creating games allows you to ask yourself questions that you don't usually consider with standard software. When you're working with database management, you don't necessarily always think about things like optimization, animation, or user interface. Sometimes we're a bit too set in our ways from the past 10, 20, or 30 years. And sometimes seeing what can be done in FireMonkey in particular can inspire you or give you ideas for traditional applications, or of course for making small video games as well, since it's quite fun when you have ideas and want to bring them to life. So my name is Patrick Prémartin, and I am an Embarcadero MVP, a freelance Delphi and web developer, a corporate and private trainer, as well as a content creator, especially active on platforms like Twitch, YouTube, and several other sites where you can easily find me when you search for Delphi or my name. I've included a few helpful links on the page, especially the one that will allow you to contact me directly if you have any questions or would like to connect. I've also added links related to Delphi books for the catalog of books on Pascal and Delphi that I try to keep up to date. The blog developer Pascal.fr, Learning Delphi for VOD, which actually contains some courses, some training sessions, and all the presentations I've done online or even offline for that matter. Since some of them were recorded and are or will be posted online on the site. You'll also find some of my software directly on Getit or from within Delphi, of course. Well, Delphi or C++ Builder, since some are available for both. In 2018, during the CodeRage conference, I created a little game called Christmas Game, which was a simple clicker, a game where you had to tap on falling items on the screen while avoiding the bombs. I showed how to use FireMonkey to slightly tweak Delphi's standard event and click system in order to make a small game. I recompiled the program for Windows and macOS. They are available for download from the game's website. I recently put the website back online along with all the others. This year, I'm going to try the exercise again. So mixing standard Delphi elements, in this case, Delphi 13 Florence or Delphi Community Edition, with open source projects, mine in this case, and also a few small utilities that I originally created to make my life easier, but which I've made available and that you can download yourself. Just like the previous one, you can download the game in its CodeRage 2025 version from the website christmasgameevolution.gamolf.fr. The PDF of this presentation, the links, the replays, and other materials will also additionally be available online as well. I've put them and will be putting them, depending a bit on when you're watching this video, on apprendredelphi.fr, so you can find them there whenever you need. In a link that will redirect you to a repository on Codeberg for now. For the past 2 months, I've been playing Plants vs. Zombies 2 on my iPad, and this old free game that still works and is still maintained by its publisher has given me a few ideas. So here, in this particular case, between 2 advertisements and 2 prompts to pay for in-game items, you'll find something interesting. It's a bit like the kinds of things we also see in other modern games, let's say, that do well on the app stores, especially on Apple, with engaging actions and a variety of mini games inside that are specifically designed to make users want to come back to keep earning even more points, which allow them to get more items and rewards in the game, and so on. Most of these games depend on playtime, either to earn items for free or to encourage in-app purchases. This game actually gave me a few ideas. For quite some time, I've been creating little games on my own, but they don't have any mechanics that encourage players to come back. So unless the game really interests them, they tend to abandon it pretty quickly. In Christmas Game Evolution, I wanted to try out some things I found in Plants vs. Zombies and other video games. I'll bring back several activities, including the clicker like in the 2018 version. In the match 3, you'll also find an inventory of items to collect and a system of objectives. The player won't be able to stop the current game unless they choose to, and if they do, they'll have to start over from scratch. They'll simply have to get the highest score possible, a score that will then be shared online with other players of the game in versions that will be released later. Access to activities will be exclusively through objectives, and of course there will be everything needed to generate them automatically within the app. Other activities may be added later on. The CodeRage 2025 version of the game is not complete. It was developed in just a few days on Twitch in November 2025, and I included the basic features so I could present it to show how it works, but the system is not completely finalized. The public versions will, of course, be complete and will evolve over time depending on whether or not there are players, of course. Before we continue and get to the heart of the matter, I'm going to show you a short 30-second video that was recorded on November 24th. That is, before I added sounds to the game and before I included the warning about the game being incomplete and only in a CodeRage version, as you can see in the screenshot in the middle at the bottom of this screen. Just so you know, there is no sound in the following videos, in the short demos. I prefer to record them as they are and let you see what happens. Aside from the marketing aspect and the story, video games essentially depend on three things: the game engine, the graphics, and the sounds, whether it's background music or sound effects. Christmas Game Evolution is no exception to this rule. We're going to take a look at all of that in the following pages and minutes. During the dev days of summer 2024, I presented an entirely new project, Gamolf FMX Game Starter Kit. It's a starter kit for creating video games in FireMonkey with Delphi. It's a far cry from what's available in Castle Game Engine and others. I keep things pretty basic in terms of how it works. There are no tools and there are no built-in game mechanics. It's mainly a set of features, classes, and units that bring together everything you need to make a basic game. I'll show you. More things in other videos soon, including a template I added a few days ago. The 2024 presentation is available on Embarcadero's YouTube channel in English, and I also made a French version on my own YouTube channel, which you can also watch on PeerTube if you prefer. The links are on the screen, and you'll also find them in the code repository for this presentation. Gamolf FMX Game Starter Kit is a set of native features for creating video games. It supports scene management, screens, interface buttons, whether they're real buttons, radio buttons, checkboxes, or others, depending on how you implement them. By the way, in Christmas Game Evolution, you have several examples of this. I also handle interface elements accessible via keyboard, mouse, or game controllers, background music, sound effects, and translation, meaning text display and a few other small things like toolbars and so on. The starter kit is based on other repositories, which I'll show you in just a moment. You can download it at fmxgamesterkit.developer-pascal.fr. I prefer to give you the links to the websites of the repositories rather than the repositories themselves, since I'm currently migrating everything from GitHub to other platforms, so the links will be more permanent. There were several ways to use the starter kit. Either the method I use myself, doing everything by hand from the start, or creating an assistant for the IDE and offering you an interface directly integrated into the development environment to create video games, or making a zip file with everything inside and delivering it to you as is. I chose this solution. I submitted a zip file to get it for the first version, which is the one I used in the template video that I'll show you later, with all the pre-installed projects. A program that just needs to be renamed and then completed with your own game mechanics. Obviously to add your screens, your buttons, your graphics, and so on. The zip file is also downloadable from its code repository. Here, exceptionally, I've provided you with the codebug link. It will also be available from the presentation, just like the starter kit website, since it's closely related to that. Video games based on the starter kit therefore use several other repositories. The one I use for the About dialog boxes. A dialog box with just an icon, the software information, and then 2 input fields, or rather display fields, that allow you to provide the license and the project description. The CLT-Seg API project, which is my license and file version manager, which is also integrated by default but is not active unless you specify it directly in the programs. The Delphi game engine, which was a set of libraries that manages game controllers, music, and other small things that are very useful for video games but also for other projects. And my toolbox, my Pascal and Delphi libraries that contain functions and components for RTL, VCL, and FireMonkey. And a little bit around Skia as well, since I used Skia for Delphi for certain things. The code repositories, libraries, and components can also be used independently. You don't have to use them through the starter kits. You can simply take the relevant unit or the code repository that interests you. The About dialog boxes, like my toolbox and libraries, are used in all my software. The code repositories oriented towards video games can also be used for things other than video games. For example, I use Delphi Game Engine in ZigPlay, an MP3 player. I use the part that handles music playback, loops, and other information that is managed directly within it. You can also use parts of my libraries directly in your own personal projects, exactly like Gregory Berseguet did in the game that he recently released called Nagori. It's a fantastic little arcade game that you'll be able to download from December 2nd directly from his website or on itch. On gbsoft.fr/Nagori, let me show you a few seconds of it. The source code for everything I distribute is available on CodeBug or GitHub and will soon be on other source code hosting platforms as well. Everything is available under the AGPL version 3 or MIT license. My libraries for Delphi and web scripts are distributed under the AGPL version 3 license, and my software, once compiled, are distributed as shareware. They are free, but you are encouraged to purchase a user license. If you can afford it and want to support my work, I have provided the links to the 2 stores that handle licenses, especially for developer licenses for the libraries. If the AGPL version 3 license doesn't suit you, you can opt for a standard developer license. And for the software, store.olfsoftware.fr. Just a quick reminder, even when something is free, sometimes you still need to pay because open source project developers, just like with free software, creators, musicians, and illustrators also need to eat, live, have a place to stay, and clothe themselves. And they do all this in their free time. So don't hesitate to support them if you can, especially if you use their projects in your own. As for the graphics, in Christmas Game Evolution, actually there are only the game's credits screen is the only one that contains a classic visual component, the t-text, for displaying something. Everything else comes from bitmap images or SVGs, with the SVGs being processed by Skia to convert them into bitmaps. I mainly use images, rectangles, and circles to display all these elements, stacked in the screens along with lots of other positioning components. I do this because my program doesn't require a lot of animation. None of this is really CPU intensive, so I can afford to do it this way. Obviously, for a project with a lot of animations, especially explosions, battles, or similar effects, it would be better for you to draw directly on the Forms canvas or the Skya canvas if you have the opportunity. Let's say I'm mainly addressing developers, and I'm going to assume that you're not any more comfortable than I am with drawing software. Still, for a video game, it's somewhat useful nonetheless. You need to be able to handle Illustrator or equivalent vector drawing tools, Photoshop or similar programs, and other sources of information. We'll look at some basic operations, especially how to extract SVG and PNG images from an Illustrator document. Then we'll see how I can suggest ways for you to use them in your Delphi projects, whether it's for a video game or something else. Because, of course, anything that's a vector image can be used as an icon in image lists or directly on the screen. So I'm going to offer you 6 short introductory videos, again without sound, just with on-screen information, each lasting from 1 to 4 minutes. First, we'll look at how to export PNG and SVG files from an Illustrator document. The screenshots you have don't match the video I made. Here, it's related to a graphic font. In the video, I used more common images that could be used as icons. But the principle remains the same. We start from Illustrator, open the file, try to group or ungroup the elements to have coherent components, and rename them. Then we use the global export tool to retrieve the PNG and SVG files. I'll let you take a look at that. Next, once we have our PNGs and SVGs, we'll try to import them into Delphi. The first step is to put the PNG files into a TI image list. The FireMonkey Timage list is multi-resolution by default, just like the Timage collection in VCL. However, it doesn't have the same image import tool. So when you have 100 of them in 5 or 6 versions, it's just not doable in FireMonkey from the development environment. Or else you could spend days on it. I developed a small tool called folder to FMX image list that does this with drag and drop. I'll show you how it works right now. Using PNGs is great, but when you have large ones and a lot of them, and on top of that, in multiple resolutions, the size of the executable files can quickly skyrocket, and it's not always super convenient in some cases. If you can use vector images, it's always better. In this case, vector images are just text, so I thought, why not integrate them directly into Delphi source code? I developed a small utility for that, which retrieves files from a folder and generates a unit for us with Pascal classic string constants, or in multi-line version since Delphi 12. I'll let you see how it's used. In my video games, I like to use graphic backgrounds for displaying text. I had developed a class for that, which is actually based on a tier frame. You can find it in my toolbox, and I'd like to show you how we can use it to display a software title, for example, or text on buttons. In Christmas Game Evolution, I wanted to display a multi-line text, especially for the box indicating that CodeRage 2025 had its own version and that it was limited. It's the box that appears on the game screen with the letters in yellow and orange. Obviously, I didn't draw them one by hand. It's an arrangement that creates itself automatically from the graphical text display I just showed you, but split word by word. I'll quickly show you what the source code looks like. You can go check it out in the code repositories if you want. Finally, the images that were used for the menu with drawings of cakes or cookies were too large to be used as PNGs. So I switched to SVGs, vector images. You just need a container, and to display the letters one by one at the right size, like I did before with the PNGs, but this time using SVGs. In video games, it's not just about text. Everything else is also graphical. In this case, I used the T-rectangle and T-circle components to display the SVGs in their fill.bitmap property. Let me quickly show you how to do this using SVG images that are stored in your project's source code. Where can you find images for your software? Well, I have quite a few sources. I've included some links for you, and you'll find more in the code repository. I'm not going to go into all of that in detail. Generally speaking, what you find on the internet obviously shouldn't be used as is. Every image, every visual or audio content has rights, or rather has an owner. So don't just use them because you like them or because you feel like using them. Instead, use images for which you have obtained the rights, whether they are royalty-free or privately owned. If possible, hire an illustrator or artist to create your own images. It will always be more convenient and better for your projects. As for music, there are two types in video games: background music and sound effects. Background music is what we hear almost constantly in games. We might not always notice it, but it's always there. Sound effects are everything that happens when there's an action on screen or to scare the players a little. In Delphi, there's a T-Media player that can be used in both VCL and FireMonkey to do all of this. That's what I use without really using it directly, since I go through the library I made for video games, which is found in Delphi Game Engine. Gamolf FMX Music Loop seamlessly manages music playback loops, so looped or not looped, but in this case it handles playing a sound. And you also have a T-Sound list, which is a class that allows you to manage a list of sound files and handles a pool of audio players, so you can reuse the elements by playing them alone or several at the same time. It's fairly simple in terms of coding, and the result is actually pretty good. Of course, there are other libraries that don't use the operating system APIs, such as Base, whether open source or not. You'll probably find other options if you look around a bit, but T-Media Player is sufficient for most users. Regarding the starter kit, I always use the same unit, but in reality, the starter kit itself includes background music playback and sound effects. For background music, you just need to set the information in the constants when creating the project. And then for sound effects, you need to customize the unit called uSoundEffects. There are comments in all the files, there are to-dos to handle, and warnings. Feel free to refer to a simple compilation of a blank project. You'll find all the information in there. The configuration for sounds, volume, and whether or not it's allowed by the user is found in the standard project settings. This is also supported and handled by the starter kit. In Christmas Game Evolution, I wanted to offer you several different pieces of music. To do that, I had to slightly modify the starter kit since it didn't support this feature, and now you can directly change the file or files that play as background music through code. Obviously, I made sure that this wouldn't disrupt games already using this feature, since backward compatibility is still a very important point. Changes in the libraries shouldn't break the code of those who use them. So in my game, I created 3 sounds, numbers 1, 2, and 3. They are configured in the UCGE config unit, and selecting a type of sound triggers the playback of the corresponding MP3. It's pretty straightforward in the source code, you can go check it out. As for sound effects, I didn't include any in the base game. The CodeRage 2025 version doesn't have any. There will obviously be some in the public version. If you want to see how it works, take a look at Bidyu or Dad48, who use it extensively, or of course the short demos that I will publish as links in the presentation as well as on its code repository. Where can you find sounds? Well, actually, just like with images, there are online image banks and sound banks. Be careful though, sounds are a bit of a sensitive issue. If you use things with questionable rights or dubious sources, you could end up being blocked on video sites or software distribution platforms or get hit with DMCA notices. Whether they're abusive or justified, it's always a possibility. In my games, I usually go through Humble Bundle, Open Game Art, Game Dev Market, and others like Jamendo, used exceptionally for Pumpkin Killer, which allows me to have dozens, even hundreds, of music tracks on my hard drives and to pick from them whenever I need. Obviously, that doesn't solve everything, since every piece of music sold by Humble Bundle has to be bought by thousands of developers, marketers, and content creators in general. A track purchased from these libraries won't be unique. It won't be dedicated to your game. At best, it matches the atmosphere you want to create, but that's not enough on its own. If you have a budget, or if you want something personalized, you need to hire professional composers. And you can find professionals especially on Twitch and YouTube, since some musicians regularly stream and share their content, their music, or their passion online with us. And in this case, I can suggest 3 French musicians, Saris, Loin du Ciel, and Mr. MV, who can create custom music for you, obviously as a paid service, if you use them in your games, software, or presentation videos in general. Saris, whose real name is Xavier Dang, is a professional composer. I've included some links if you want to check out his work. He notably composed the music together with Mr. MV for the video game Norea the Gold Project, which was published by Some Friends. So you can find the music on YouTube on his channel if you want to listen to some of his creations. He is available, responds quite quickly, and can create directly on YouTube or elsewhere. Of course, streaming his creations is not mandatory. Loinduciel is a musician, I know him a little bit. He streams quite regularly on Twitch with a rather astonishing dexterity in mixing notes, instruments, and all sorts of things. He also has a YouTube channel where he posts replays of his streams. He also sometimes composes for video games, streams, charity or commercial events, short films, and movies. Don't hesitate to pitch your projects to him. You may have seen him in the video Triskaidekaphobia, which was released on YouTube and PeerTube following Ian Barker's conference in Brazil last year. Ian had talked about version 13 of Delphi, a RAD Studio, C++ builder, and the number 13, which Embarcadero had decided not to skip, unlike many other software publishers. I mentioned it to Loinduciel during one of his streams. He started a pretty cool improvisation. You can watch it on MakerTube. He also composed the music for the video game Plomtris during a collaborative game jam event in 2023, while he was composing live on his channel and I was coding on mine. The result was pretty funny to watch. Feel free to check out the video game. There are demo videos on the website, and of course you can download it if you want. For Christmas game Evolution, I wanted to try something a little different, so I'm offering you 3 background music tracks made by some friends: Gladys from Le Tango in Paris, Cole Argel from the Pyrenees, and a buddy from Hawaii who preferred to remain anonymous. The singing sessions were recorded. You'll be able to watch them on replay with the links from the presentation. Of course, if you want to hear the music, feel free to download Christmas Game Evolution. In video games, when we talk about screens, we're actually talking about scenes. And here, in this case, that's the terminology I've kept for the starter kit. All scenes must inherit from tscene ancestor, which contains everything needed to handle display and translations. Each scene must register itself with the scene manager during its initialization. Each scene corresponds to a scene type declared in the constants, but a scene can also use several types. If needed, however, a type should only be used in a single scene. If it's referenced by multiple scenes, only the last one will be handled. Scenes are instantiated the first time they are displayed and are never destroyed. So if you display the same scene multiple times, it will always be the same instance. Remember to reset all your parameters in the 2 methods provided for that purpose. Scenes are independent from each other, and so are the units. No scene needs to use the others when it wants to display itself. You have a show scene and a hide scene method to perform your actions when a scene appears or disappears from the screen. You have a method to translate texts on the screen. Of course, you can use whichever translation engine you prefer. This is not enforced by the starter kit. And you have 2 special types of scenes: none, which, as its name suggests, is used when there is nothing to display, and exit, to exit the program. Be careful, exiting the program with an exit will not automatically save your data. You need to do that beforehand. In the video game Christmas Game Evolution, there are 8 scenes. In practice, in the source code, you'll find others since I had planned for additional screens, but they were not activated in the CodeRage 2025 version. The splash screen, which is the welcome screen with a progress bar, the clicker, which involves click activities like in the 2018 game, the game credits, the game scene, which contains the list of objectives to achieve and access to the inventory. The game over scene, which is used when you have lost all your lives in the various game activities. The home scene, the start menu that allows access to settings, the game credits, and the game scene itself. The inventory, the match 3, and the options, which contain the standard buttons as well as radio buttons and checkboxes that are interconnected with each other. Feel free to refer to them if you want to see how to reproduce them in a game, or more generally, to be able to handle them with a keyboard or a game controller, since this kind of functionality can also work in real software. And when I say real software, I mean traditional management software, not necessarily video games. Scenes are drawn in the sheet designer using a stack of frames and lines of code. Some frames contain other frames, so be careful as this can cause display issues. Most of them have a vertical scroll bar to avoid problems with screen height. If you're playing on smartphones, the screen always needs to remain accessible. The width is fairly easy to adjust, but the height is sometimes A bit tricky, so a vertical scroll box is used in the background in every scene to avoid rejections from Google, Apple, and Amazon during app validation. In the CodeRage 2025 version, the splash screen doesn't do anything. It's just an image with a progress bar. In reality, there's no action behind it. You can skip it with escape. Obviously, most games download various information at this stage. Here, I really didn't need anything except a screen just to say, hello, the game is starting. So the clicker activity is the same as in 2018, but it's been recoded. I use the background of the rectangle to draw the SVGs and its click event. Actually, not on click, because in Delphi a click action is triggered when you release the mouse button or when you lift your finger from the screen. In a video game, you should use on mouse down instead to trigger the action when you press. Not when you lift your finger, otherwise it can have some rather strange effects. The number of lives, the score, and the number of centers you've collected in the game appear on certain screens. These actually also come from frames, which themselves are inside another frame that serves as a toolbar. The whole thing is fully automated, you just have to place them on the screen. When the information in the current game data changes, it triggers messages that are intercepted by these elements. The match 3 activity isn't coded directly in the game. In fact, it's a T-frame that comes from a demo I published on the FMX Game Snippets repository. It's a collection of example features that you can find in video games, which you have in a separate repository. The games Bideo and Koala Match 3 use the same T-frame. So you have different images, of course, in both, or rather in all three. And you also have different behaviors, since you can override the information from the original form, just as you can inherit from it and change things. I hope you found this presentation interesting and maybe it gave you some ideas. Feel free to discuss it in the chat or later on. I'm always available. If you have any questions, just send me a message, no problem. The source code and executable for the CodeRage 2025 version of the game are available on the website. This presentation will also have links to its code repository. And if you have any questions, as I mentioned, you can also contact me on Twitch when I'm streaming. Just because I'm working on a project on screen doesn't mean I can't answer. I'll let you know clearly if I can pause or not, but generally speaking I tend to be able to digress without any problem, so mostly in French and sometimes in English. Because once I'm on Twitch I don't have HeyGen to translate in real time. I have to speak myself. I've shared a few links with you, so the list of my video games on gamolf.fr, the list of utilities on Gedit or from my websites. If you have any questions or needs, don't hesitate to bring them up. If you have ideas for software that you might not want to make yourself, but that you think would be useful for developers, feel free to mention those too. It could be interesting. And then I redid all the websites over the past few weeks. Those who followed me on Twitch were able to watch and help me with those tasks. All the code repositories are in the process of being moved to a separate site for each repository, so that's about 200 in total. And on each site, at the bottom of the page, you'll find a link called Dev Corner or Developers Corner, where you'll find links to the code repositories, presentations, videos, devlogs on the blogs, and also the documentation for the projects, exported either with Dochinsight or PasDoc, depending on the type of project. You'll also find some links to replays of the Twitch streams, or other videos where I was able to show how the code was written, or do code reviews, or other things related to the project in question. So there's a lot of content, enough to feed Google and the others for a few years and maybe help keep climbing up the pointless TOB ranking. Ah yes, one last thing. I'm going to start sharing through Getit, and some of my colleagues are doing it too, source code that you'll be able to modify. Remember to copy the things you download via Getit into your own folder. This will prevent them from being deleted if a cleanup, version change, or removal of the relevant packages occurs. Obviously, if you download the video game creation template and modify it as is in the Gedit catalog folder, you might run into some unpleasant surprises sooner or later. So save everything, copy your files into a proper working folder that isn't the default installation folder. Same goes for the examples and you'll have more peace of mind. And in any case, make backups no matter what. To finish, I give you the download link for the presentation again, which will also include the videos of the recorded replays, as well as quite a few short videos on the topic since, believe it or not, this whole thing has turned out to be a bit bigger than originally planned. So I'll be putting everything online in the coming days, or it might already be online depending on when you're watching this presentation. Thank you for your attention. Thanks to DeepL for its help in translating the slides, and to Heijen for the voice translation. Thanks to Ian, Martha, and the whole team. I hope we'll meet again at some point. See you soon. Bye. Boom, boom.